All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you guys hear back in the back? All right, great. So we're right on 2 o'clock. Welcome to the town hall specific to the resident survey. My name is Mark Randall. I'm the chair of Long Range Planning Committee. With me today is Kathleen Sartoris. Kathleen is the chair of the subcommittee that's been working on this survey from starting almost a year ago. And then down in the front here, we have Charlie Woodhouse, who's with us as part of our survey subcommittee. Charlie is instrumental, along with Alan Lyon, that's sitting in the back, looking at the data post-survey, and he's the one that has put together most of the data, all the data slides that you're going to see here today. And so he's here if we have any questions on this as we go through this. This session is being recorded today and will be available on the website so that people that aren't here are able to view this. There are paper copies that were available in the back. We did ask you to share in case you couldn't, there were too many people versus paper. Part of the paper, it's in black and white, but the intent is to help you. Some of these slides might not be easy to see far in the back. So first of all, we want to thank you for taking the time taking the survey, because we know that it wasn't a short process. We want to remind you that it's done once every 3 years. And so when we're doing a comprehensive survey, we really need you as the owners of this HOA to get involved and really provide your feedback so that we can get actionable data for planning purposes. We made some mistakes. I think anytime you do something for a year and you look at it 100 billion times, you're going to find some. So as an example, in the first early edit, we had Wyoming included as a state, and somehow that dropped off. We missed it. And the 4 of you from Wyoming, you let us know about that. So we apologize. We heard a lot about the scrolling feature in SurveyMonkey, something that we need to do a better job of next time. When you look at a question on paper and you ask people to rank things 1 through 5, it looks pretty simple. You try to put that in SurveyMonkey, it's not quite as pretty. And then we combined Unit 3 instead of splitting that with 3N and 3 South. So those are just some examples of further away. Okay. Those are just some examples of how we could have improved things. So today we're going to go through the presentation, and I'm going to take us through the presentation, then we're going to open it up for your questions and comments, and we have received some in advance, so Kathleen will start us off by reading some of the ones that we have, and then we'll have these mics available for you guys. When you do come up, just a couple things. First of all, please speak clearly into the mic since this is being recorded. It's hard to hear this back if you're trying to hear after the fact on the website. And second of all, there are people here from both HOAs. In a town hall setting, you're certainly welcome to be here from HOA 2, but question-wise, we're going to hold that to people that are in HOA 1. The review that you're going to see today is really a high-level review of the data, and then we're going to show you some examples of how we can sort of reset or resplit some of the data as we go down through this, just so you're aware and are able to understand how we got here, okay? Charlie? Okay, survey objectives. So there really was the responsibility of long-range planning. We were trying to make sure that kind of 3 different components here. First was from our own planning. We wanted to make sure the voice of the homeowners would enable us to do the long-term strategic planning. We also wanted to make sure that the data itself was able to be useful to both the board and the management, Vivian and staff, primarily around primarily so they can make more short-term and intermediate decisions. And then we do plan to keep following up on this data and keep diving through it and showing some various ideas where we find people are showing the greatest interest. We wanted to make sure that this was actionable, so we have a complete survey database that can be queried, and we can do cross-correlation between multiple survey questions along with demographics. You'll see some examples of that today. And then we want to use this data to answer follow-up questions for the resident board and the staff. We're going to continue, obviously today as part of the communication, but this isn't the end. So if we start finding additional factors or information that we believe are of interest to you as residents, we certainly want to be able to continue to send that out. You probably have seen some of the email blasts that we send in advance with some of the demographics and some of that stuff. That was our intent, was to be, kind of fluid in our process. And then as we find additional specific topics, there might become an available, maybe we want to do a targeted survey on a given area versus a broad survey. So those are some of our thoughts as we looked at the objectives. Next slide, please. So the Long Range Planning Committee, we had a great diverse subcommittee with good backgrounds. We had a person that was a snowbird, so we had some real good variety of people on the subcommittee. We reviewed the past HOA1 surveys. We met with HOA2 to capture the lessons learned from their survey that was completed in March of 2020. We consulted with the various stakeholders, the Long Range Planning Committee as a full, the board president and liaisons, the general manager, and the golf and food and beverage. I know that Kathleen spent time, as an example, with golf, food and beverage, and Vivian was involved in several meetings with us as we went through to try to refine the survey itself. And then we made the necessary edits in real time as we got that feedback. So to maximize our participation rate, we started last fall. You probably saw notifications going out from Linda Irwin, and we were trying to capture email addresses for each resident in the household. And the benefit for this wasn't just for the survey, but this way too, even when we're doing email blasts, we basically have a situation where with the email blasts that you guys get from the HOA, we now have more addresses available. And the objective was to capture one resident survey per household, per individual. Charlie? There we go. Never mind. Okay. For some reason, yours died. Okay. We partnered with the unit representatives throughout the process, and so we'd like to thank Laverne Chris, who's the chair, as well as her group of unit representatives who really were instrumental helping us. Jason Rasmussen, who's here today helping record this, and as our webmaster, was the one that did the loading and editing in SurveyMonkey. We offered a paper process if residents preferred that method. We received 67 of those, which was 3.8% of the total. The survey window was quite long. We primarily wanted to make sure we didn't miss anybody that might be out of the country or wasn't able to get to the survey, so we had a 6-week span. As I mentioned, we had quite a bit of advanced communication. The subcommittee partnered in with Vivian, Jason, Linda, or Leslie, I should say, and Linda to really help us with that communication. We established a contest between the units to encourage participation. Just if you don't remember seeing this, Unit 16 had the highest percentage response. We weren't looking for total, but a percentage of the residents in that unit. Unit 10A had the second highest, and Unit 21 had the third highest. Survey responses were 1,773 from a projected 3,574 HOA1 total residents, which is a 50% survey response rate, and produced over 1 million data entries. So if you don't think we have some data, we do. If you go into Google and you do a search on expected participation rate of surveys, you'll find that the typical is 10 to 30%. 50% or higher is considered excellent. So congratulations to all the residents for jumping in there and participating, because this data is solid. We have a lot of good solid data here. Okay, next. So we're going to go into the demographics section. So the first question we asked is, what is your age group? And basically, again, like I said, some of these have been sent out prior to today's meeting by email blasts. The majority of the people here are between, or not a majority, but 47% are between 70 to 79 years old. And then you can see it pretty much bell curves back and forth right here. This is the first time in a survey we've added the category 85 to 89 and 90 plus. Because as we're aging just in society in general, this starts to set a baseline, and we can look against that as we move out further in these future surveys. Next. This is an example of what I was talking about, where we went back and looked at surveys all the way from 2013 through 16, 19, and 22. And what you'll see here is, in general, we're getting a little older in this community compared to what we used to be. Probably the most interesting number would be back in 2013, if you add up the numbers, 41% of the residents were under age 70. In 2016, that number was 46%. 2019, that number was 37%. In 2022, that number was 28%. So the number under 70 has changed. We're not drawing any conclusions. That might be something to research further, but just again, our way of being able to show how things change over time. Then obviously, we can start breaking down further by the demographic questions. So, what is your gender is one of the ways we can break it down. Next. We can then start taking a look at gender by age group. So you'll see up to age 70, there's a higher percentage of women that responded or are living here, because this is a pretty significant number. 70 to 79 is pretty equal, and then as it gets a little bit older, tends to be more male. Okay? So again, just not to draw conclusions, but just to show you the variety of ways that we can continue to refine this data. We have not done this with every question for today, primarily because we would be serving you dinner. So we want to make sure that we try to move through this and get through sort of a macro level view of what we came up with. And then we have that ability, like I said, to continue to sort down later on and get additional refined answers back out to you. Next. Are you fully retired or still working? This is actually a rolled up number from the question, because the question asked part-time, full-time. It asked if you were working from home or if you were working outside the home. Those numbers were so small, we just thought, well, we'll just roll them to get a general sense for how many people are retired versus how many people are working. So that's the answer to that. How long have you lived in Saddlebrook? So you can see it's pretty big, 52% of the people have been here 9 years or less. You've got a little bit dip right in here. If you go backwards in time, that's about when the Great Recession was happening. So you wonder, sometimes there's external factors that could drive some of these statistics. And then you can just see how it comes back up again for 21% have been here more than 20 years. Okay? And again, back to that prior slide, we can go back and compare to prior surveys and give you that same view that we did for the ages. Okay, what is your current Saddlebrook unit number? Now these are raw numbers, these are not percentages. So 50% were in 8A and to its left. And so these are just raw numbers of people who answered the survey depending on the unit you were living in. And again, that's part of the reason we gave you the paper copy. Some of these aren't easy to read on the screen. And also you'll be able to see this same presentation on our website after we get done today. Next. How many people currently reside in your home? 17% said 1, 81% said 2, and 1% said 3 or more. Okay? And by the way, these first 9 questions you could not avoid answering. So we really pushed you to answer because we need the demographics in order to use that material to answer against some of these other questions further in. Okay? How many months per year do you reside in Saddlebrook? 79% of you are here greater than 7 months. And by the way, the numbers at the bottom are the actual numbers of responses in each of these categories. 18% are 4 to 7 months. 3% are less than 4 months. All right, this is a bit of an eye chart, but we'll move. But just in general, the question is, before moving to Saddlebrook, which state did you live in? And you can see that it's pretty steep, and then it dives all the way down. And again, to apologize to those of you from Wyoming, you didn't make it. Let's go on to the next slide. So this is a blown up view of the slide you just looked at, so hopefully you can see it better. But 2/3 of the respondents lived in New York or to its left. So there's 10 states on here where 2/3 of our residents have come from, including 7%, I believe is Arizona's at 7% of the people moved from Arizona to Saddlebrook. So, and you're going to see we're going to continue to do this throughout, where some of these are going to be eye charts, and then we'll kind of explode it for you. So hopefully further back in the audience, I'm not sure, way in the back if you'll be able to see it. But again, these will be on our website. So, all right. Which other communities did you consider before choosing Saddlebrook? These were specific ones in the survey. These over here with asterisks, we got those from looking at your comments. So some of you wrote in and put different comments that weren't specific, because these were more intended to say, right around us, where are people looking before they decide to buy here, kind of our competition, if you will. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so we got through pretty fast. I went through the demographics. Again, we've sent some of those out before. That's of interest, I know, but this is kind of where the meat of it comes in. So this question was to please indicate your level of agreement with the following statements. And this is not the order in which they were presented to you. This is the order in which you answered either strongly agree, which is in the dark blue, agree, which is in the green, I don't have an opinion yet, which is in the yellow, I disagree, which is in the orange, or I strongly disagree, which is in the red. So you do believe that we should maintain the vision to be the active adult community of choice in southern Arizona. That's your number one. 93% of you, basically if you add the two together, 93% of you say that you feel safe at all times in Saddlebrook. You feel this is a well-managed community is your next one. There's a real sense of community here is your next one. The reciprocal use with HOA2 is a valuable asset to our community. People respect their neighbors and obey the rules. The architectural landscape design guidelines and permit processes are reasonable. And then the enforcement of the ALC design guidelines is consistent and reasonable. So again, we're not here to draw conclusions today, but it just gives a sense for what our residents are telling us about these given categories and how they feel we're doing overall. Next. How satisfied are you with the aspect of HOA1? So again, these are sorted by how you answered. Strongly, very satisfied, satisfied, no opinion yet, dissatisfied, and you can see we do pretty well here on these questions. So the upkeep of the roads and maintenance is the number one. Upkeep and maintenance of the facilities is number two. Upkeep of common area landscape and appearance is number three. The HOA1 general manager and administrative staff is number five. Variety of amenities comes next. The management of the finances, and then finally, the reasonableness of current assessment and fees. Okay. So this is directed at the board of directors and how you feel they're doing. So once again, it's rated based on if you strongly agree, no opinion yet, or disagree. So you can see in this particular category, there's quite a few that have no opinion yet. So the number one thing you think that the strongest is communicating the HOA1 plans and projects, the unit representative structure and its communication, the funding between near-term and long-term needs, creating HOA1 plans and projects, being responsive to long-term needs, board committee structure and communication, and then listening to community inputs. Okay. So the next question was, how often do you use these forms of communication for information? And so this is a count of often and occasionally. That's what we counted for this particular slide. So we still are pretty paper-oriented around here with mail tube inserts, saddlebag notes, the communicator in print, and Saddlebrook progress. Then we get down here and you've got the email blast from HOA1, the HOA1 website, the unit rep updates, and then the online communicator. And I'll just tell you now that I found quite a few people in the HOA that don't even know that the print version is actually available by email if you ask for it. So maybe that's a pitch to some people to ask for it. The online neighborhood forums, the HOA2 email blasts and Monday messages. We now have the TVs in the clubhouse, and we have the weekly video communications, the HOA2's website, and then the HOA2 for the record. Okay, question here was, are you in favor of strategic discussions and investigations that could, over time, lead to the unification of HOA1 with HOA2? So 57% of you said yes, 24% said I'm undecided, and 19% said no. Now, this question in particular, it's important to say the word here is unification. It does not use the term merger. And this is the same question that HOA2 was asked back in March of 2020. Their response rate was 74%, 18%, 8%. Next slide. This is again a way for us to take that same question and break it into age group. I'm not going to go through this in detail. You'll get a chance to look at it later if you're interested. But basically, we just asked, okay, what's your age and what's your feeling on that prior question? Next slide. This slide is another way of cutting it based on how long you've lived here. So if you've lived here less than 5 years, how do you feel about the question? 5 through 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19, and 20 plus years. So again, not drawing conclusions here today on this. We're just trying to show you the variety of ways we can keep sorting through to better understand how the question might be answered at a more micro level. Next slide. Next, we went into amenities. So we asked you, and this is where some of the scrolling came in, and we know that there were people that weren't happy that they had to pick 1 through 5, but the fact is you got to force people to make decisions, and the only way to do that is you got to just force the box. So once we force it, we at least get it's kind of like if you have 10 projects to do at your home, but you can only afford 3, you better pick the best 3, right? So this is our methodology, was to force your reasons. So in this case, the lower case are reasons that could be changed, and then the average score was subtracted from 6 and then multiplied by the number of votes. So let me explain that to you. If I said the scenic views, which is the first one on here, is my absolute number 1, and Kathleen said it was her absolute number 5, we each got a vote, but my vote counted more than her vote because a 1 was rated higher than a 5. Okay? So that's how, when we look at these numbers, that's one of the ways you need to look at it. So, these are rolled up of math times math, if you will, but it does start to take and force you to look at it that way. So go to the next slide. So again, that last slide was hard to see. So what we've done here is we've sort of blew up the the first part, so you can see that sort of from a top perspective, the reason that you believe that you chose Saddlebrook. Okay, and so scenic views, active adult community, golf, weather, house and lot quality, overall community appearance, friends and family. Now it'll be interesting because the next question is going to ask about what do you think we need to do to keep this place marketable? So friends and family is going to change out and some others are going to come up. Okay? And then sense of community, safety, house prices, groups and clubs, clubhouse. And again, it keeps going out, but for purposes of today's presentation, we thought we should at least explode it a little bit so that if you're not in the first two rows, you could, and plus you have the paper copy, you could at least see what those are, and those are the top ones. Back one. So this is what I was talking about here. This is the same. So we asked, what's the reason you came? And then we said, okay, well, what do you think now? You're already here, but what do you think we need to do to make sure that Saddlebrook remains marketable so we keep generating interest in future buyers? And so that's the same thing that we've done here, is we've gone ahead and resequenced it. 80% of the total scores is to the left of the HOA1 financials. So if we go to the next slide, basically these are the top ones that you saw or that you're going to see here. So as an example, on the prior slide of why you moved here, the reciprocal use agreement was rated 17th. Now it's rated here up within the top 10. Friends and family is right down here. That used to be up in the top 7. So what we're happy to see about that is people thought about this and distinguished between why they came and what they believe is best for the community, sort of from a marketability standpoint. So the number 1 and 2 changed. So this was a number 2 position as to why you came here. This was number 1. Now those have completely swapped positions. Golf remains at number 3, and we're going to talk about golf in a minute here, but 58% of us are not golfers, but we still believe those courses are a big reason for our marketability. And the same thing with appearance, sense of community, so forth and so on. Okay. So let's get into golf. So 42% of the people say that they play golf. 58% say they don't play golf. Next. Okay. So now we asked, okay, how many times per month do you play at these courses? And it's broken out by Saddlebrook, Mountain View, the Preserve, and other. And if you look at the number that said they play Saddlebrook, that's 33% of the people play Saddlebrook. So we have 42% that play golf, 33% play in Saddlebrook 1, and 9% play either in Mountain View, Preserve, or other. So we wanted to make sure we distinguish, because just because you have certain percentage playing golf, does that mean they're supporting our courses, or where are they playing? So this is a less than 1. There's quite a few golfers that, play other courses less, are out there playing them. The Saddlebrook course, very few people don't play it infrequently. As you see, as time goes on, there's people who are playing. This is 17 plus. We were wondering if those people go home. So, and you'll see some of that same thing with some of the restaurant material too. So anyway, you can see here that the 1 to 4s, Saddlebrook, Mountain View, the Preserve, outside or other, and then once you get to that 5 to 8, our courses really become. Again, these are only HOA1 residents taking the survey, but that's where the dominance really starts to happen, and so the HOA1 residents really are maybe once a week at some of these other courses, and then it drops down quite a bit. All right, this one's going to take a little bit of explanation. So this is a bit of an eye chart. All right, so there were 8 questions that we asked you. And again, we'll be able to break this down. We just didn't want to go through slide after slide after slide today. So what we did here was there were 8 questions. There was a question about Saddlebrook, Mountain View, Preserve, and other. And it was, okay, tell us your top 5 only reasons why you like or play those. And then there was the opposite. Tell us the 5 top reasons you don't like Saddlebrook 1, Mountain View, Preserve, or other, okay? And what we did was we took the positives, we subtracted the negatives, and we got a rolled up number, okay? And so these are kind of the emotional numbers, is what I would call them, because people feel pretty strongly. Again, if you can there's 18 attributes here, and you can only pick 5. So in a minute, we're going to go to the next slide, only because this bottom group does not garner enough votes to really make it primary reason. So I'm going to give you a better view, if you will. So if you go to the next slide. So that's the same view, but a little bit more blown up. So we took those bottom 5 off of there. So in the Saddlebrook course, you can see course conditions are the number 1 reason that people play. They can use their cart, their friends play here, the practice facilities, and the quality of the putting surfaces. Some people even like the bunkers. So it got a positive score. And then you can see here, the use of the cart is obviously pretty strong throughout Saddlebrook. And then as an example, and again, these are HOA1 golfers just simply saying why they personally do or don't play at a given course. But you can start to see as an example what Mountain View and the Preserve start to show as far as why people from HOA1 do or don't play there. So they love the views, but from an affordability perspective, the Preserve is obviously got a negative rating. So there are balance points throughout here. And again, we're not trying to poke at any course or anything more than just trying to get people to say, again, at a macro level, if we forced you to rate 1 through 5, and we both ways, what does that start to roll up and look like? So we hope this tells, at least at a high level, a good story with the ability for this to then start to drill down further. And for those really interested, we'll present that 10-page, PowerPoint that has the micro-level details. Okay, next. This was important. This was one of the important questions that Kathleen received from the golf group. That they really wanted to know how people felt about their own communications. So 5 was very satisfied, 1 was very dissatisfied, and these are simply averages of news from the fairways, the communicator golf section, golf digest, golf-specific email blasts, and golf technique videos. These are restaurants, so these are simply number of mentions by correspondence. And again, you're going to see those are the number of mentions down below. And so these are, again, high level. These are less than 1, so you can see quite a few people dine infrequently, if you will, here or even outside. And then as time goes on, you can see 1 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, and 15 plus. If you know, Roadrunner Grill is this line here, 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 and here. So Roadrunner does very well as far as frequency. We get people using the Roadrunner for quite a long time. Again, 15 plus, that's pretty competitive even against the outside restaurants when you think about how many outside restaurants there are. And then you've got the Agave coming in right up in these numbers, does pretty well. So you get down, it's still not too bad in the 6 to 10 range. The Vistas is next. So Vistas is here, right here. And then it drops down, if you will. Okay? So again, a bit of an eye chart, but it's a way at a macro level to see what did you tell us of what far as where you go and how frequently you go to these various restaurants. Next slide. Then we asked you to rate your overall dining experience and we just asked for the HOA1 restaurants. So you can see there's very satisfied is the dark blue, satisfied is the green, yellow is neutral, orange is dissatisfied, red is very dissatisfied. So the Roadrunner Grill comes out the best of the three. And then you've got the Agave here and Vistas here, which are pretty close together when it comes to very satisfied and satisfied. You just have a lot more neutrals in those two areas. Next. Another eye chart. Okay. So this is the same thing we did with golf. This time, though, what we're doing here is there's 12 attributes, and we forced you, again, to tell us what are your top 5 that you like and what are the top 5 you don't like. So if you had 6, you had to give one up, okay? And so basically, if you look at this as an example, distance to home is very, that's number 1 here, number 1 here, and number 2 here. Versus at food quality, Roadrunner is number 1 for that, and that's number 2 for these two areas. Now the numbers are going to be different primarily because some people frequent certain restaurants more than others, so that's going to create your variations, because I guarantee you the distance to home is not that far apart. Okay. All right, so service quality is number 3 here, and then my friends meet here were number 4, and then the views from the Vista's perspective was important, and then the my friends meet here. Obviously, Roadrunner Grill is a very social environment for a lot of people to meet up, and people like the price. Nothing wrong with that. If you look at the mountain view, and again, none of these are, we kind of put a 800 as a certain number, but just in general, the number 1 positive with food quality, number 2 was service quality, and number 3 was distance to home. Mountain view, it's atmosphere. I'm sorry, the first one was Mesquite Grill. This is Mountain View. Then food quality, and then atmosphere, okay? The Preserve does well on food quality, does well on views, and does well on atmosphere. It doesn't do real well on price, but sometimes you get what you pay for, so if you love the views and you love the atmosphere, you're willing to pay a little bit more. Let's go back one, please. So I want to point out decor, because we have some work to do in this particular area. So while this Roadrunner comes out very well, its decor measurement is maybe not as high as we'd like it to be. Again, not making any judgments, but I just wanted to point that out. And part of that is because, as you're going to see further in the survey, there's a question about renovation of the Roadrunner Grill. So it's important to kind of, again, macro level look at these and sort of look at them in different ways and not to, again, draw firm conclusions, but then come back and say, well, based on what we see here, what if we slice the data this way, and that way? Now, what does that start to tell us? So okay, let's go. Again, this one here is, again, an eye chart. If you can read that, please raise your hand. But what it is, it says number of respondents who used this Saddlebrook amenity at least once a week. And the uppercase is an HOA1 amenity. So this means that you're using it. We grab the category. I use this amenity 5 times or more per month. Okay? Because we're primarily looking at this to see, well, who's the regular users of these amenities. So go to the next slide. And this is a blow up, again, of the primary, just, again, trying to make it easier to read. So you have the walking path, the HOA1 walking path, the fitness center, the golf cart paths, the restrooms, the main pool, the pet walking, the HOA1 library. HOA2 is right here, so again, you can see it's capitalized. If it's 1, it's not. If it's 2, the spa, Desert View Library, and so forth. Okay? So if you use the amenity, how satisfied are you with that amenity? So we said if you don't use it, just please skip it. So there was a very satisfied, there was a neutral, there was a dissatisfied, and there was a very dissatisfied. So we removed the neutrals because you can't make up your mind. And we said, okay, if you're a very satisfied or satisfied, we're going to give you a positive. If you're dissatisfied or very dissatisfied, we're going to give you a negative. And once again, the uppercase is an HOA1 amenity. Okay, so again, a bit of an eye chart, but we'll go on to the next slide. And this, again, sort of blows it up. So this is the way you feel about your using it and how you feel it's doing from a satisfaction perspective. This is the way you ranked them. So again, library, fitness center, HOA1 paths and sidewalks, activity centers, golf cart paths, off hours, main pool, golf course restrooms, and so forth and so on. So we're not going to sit and read them all to you, but it's a way for you to find out sort of in general, how do we feel as a combined group that we're getting satisfaction or dissatisfaction, if you will, from the amenities that we have. Okay, next slide. So this one here was, how important is this amenity to Saddlebrook, whether you use it or not? So this is different than the prior one. So this one says, if you look at our active adult community of choice in Southern Arizona mission, or vision, I should say, how important is this to us? And so this is broken down by very important and somewhat important. And again, Charlie has put these kind of in tranches, if you will. But these are all weighted or based on, the very important and the somewhat important. So this is, again, a blown up view. So a lot of these fit with the ones that you've already said that you use and you find that you great satisfaction with, but they're not all sequenced exactly the same. So it's just a way of saying, okay, it kind of comes back to the marketability part of, even if I don't use it, I still believe it to be important to this community as far as an amenity is concerned. That's what that question is really asking. Next. Okay, so let me just check the time. We're doing okay. All right, what missing services or amenities in HOA1 are important to you? We asked you once again to rank your top 5, 1 being the most important, down to 5 being your least important. You had quite a few choices to make, but you could only choose 5. This is really important because there's a lot of ideas out there for how we should move forward in given areas to improve things around here or add things. And so we wanted to sort of have people weigh in and force them to sort of tell us what those top 5 are. So you've got this one kind of caught us off guard. Deli, coffee, and ice cream shop came in at number 1. And we didn't think that would be the case, but that's a good example of it is what it is, right? So that might need some additional research because there's a difference between a coffee and ice cream. So this is where we talk about maybe if we're going to do something there, maybe we need to come back with a targeted survey and be a little bit more specific around, well, what's the definition of a deli, coffee, ice cream shop so that we can make sure we meet people's needs. The walking paths, additional walking paths, expanded fitness, the Roadrunner Grill renovation. Remember I was commenting on the decor before, right? The gated entrances. So that one was interesting to me because 93% of the people here feel safe at all times. So it's interesting that it garners that many votes. But again, we want to listen back to the very first slide, voice of the homeowners. Okay, common area, and we added the word beautification. I think the last couple of years we've seen some real nice things with some of this artwork that's going on the walls and that type of thing. So the question was, should we continue or add more to that? And I know that Property and Roads is working on that already, but that was your next one. Additional pickleball courts, a sports bar or fast food, an indoor pool, a dog park, arts and crafts, additional facilities, a multi-purpose activity center, meeting rooms, additional ones, exercise classes, additional, later bar closing, additional dance space, and steam room. Okay? Let's go to the next one. So these are just the same questions, and then we broke it apart and said, okay, is there any particular, and again, this is our way of being able to sort, but are the men or women on the same page, or are there some here that really are being, in general it's the same page, but you'll see more women want an indoor pool and more men want a sports bar. You know, that doesn't surprise me. It really doesn't. So anyway, again, this was nothing more than this is just a piece of data, and it was a way for us to show you, again, ways that we can continue to refine the data as we go forward. Next slide. So now we said, okay, and the question was, how much would be willing to pay in a one-time assessment to accommodate the added service or amenity from question 45. And it says 35 if you skip the golf section, because we had a lot of people come back and say, there is no question 45. Well, that's because if you skip the golf section, you skipped 10 questions, so your sequence of numbers changed. But basically, 78% of the people said on a one-time assessment, they'd be willing to pay something. 22%, no, not interested. 30% were, okay, up to 200. So somebody could be, yeah, I'll give you $10, but that's 1 to 200, and then you can see it kind of goes down from there. And primary reason for this is you know, if people want, sometimes you say, well, we can't do this or that because there's not enough money. Well, guess what? We're the owners. If we decide that we'll kick in more money, then the board and decision makers need to know that in advance versus trying to guess at it, right? Okay, next. And then we broke that one down by age group. So we wanted to kind of see, well, okay, is there a particular age group? And it's interesting, from the willingness to pay, it's a pretty even bell curve. So it doesn't seem to matter what people's age is. People in each age group seem to have that same feeling percentage-wise as to what they'd be willing to kick in as they went forward if they were going to do a one-time assessment. Next. This one was your HOA annual fees. Okay, so 62% this time were willing to use an increased annual fee to support their desired amenity. So much higher on the no's. 38% said no here, 45. So really, I mean, now we've got a significant change from the prior one where, you know, if you want to hit me once, I'm okay, but don't hit me too many times, because then it drops down substantially after that. But you still have 45% of the people who say that they would go up to $200 toward their annual HOA fees to accommodate the features that they voted on in question 45, 35 if you didn't answer the golf question. Okay. All right, so the last thing was there was an open text comments, that section that you guys were able to just talk. And 29% of you did, 509. And many of you had multiple topics, ideas, issues within your individual responses. And I want to comment a little bit on that. So we're not here today to talk about, well, so-and-so said or whatever, because there's a wide swing of opinions in some of these comments, positive to negative, and the way people phrase things are very different. So it does help to clarify when you're looking at the data. You can start to see some trends in there, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. A lot of you took time just to thank the management, staff, and board of directors, which I think that's great. And then there were 4 major themes, and we'll show you that in a minute. HOA unification topic, pickleball, safety, security, walking paths, and sidewalks. And then there were significant restaurant and other amenity comments collectively, but they were done on so many various aspects that we really couldn't draw a lot of broad level conclusions for this particular meeting. All right, so this is the topics with the highest number of comments. So we had 84 on the HOA unification, we had 68 on pickleball, we had 46 on safety and security. The majority of these were actually on the gating. And then we had 45 that dealt with the walking paths. Next slide. So before we go to the comments and questions from you guys, I just want to thank and acknowledge our team. So as I mentioned, Kathleen here did a tremendous job as our survey subcommittee chair. Larry Crum was on that subcommittee. Ken Lund was on that subcommittee. And Charlie, sitting down here, was on that subcommittee. And then Alan Lyon was really instrumental working with Charlie to help us extract the data after the fact. In fact, originally, Vivian had budgeted about $3,000, I believe, somewhere in that range, so we could hire somebody with the expertise to slice the data. And Alan and Charlie stood up and said, give us a shot at this. And I think they did a heck of a job in today's presentation that can kind of show you that there's some strong capabilities within this team. But just in general, I still want to make sure, Ed Foster, Tony, Dave, all of these people were very heavily involved, a lot of time involved with preparing. We started in May of last year. And so I just want to thank them in particular for all of their help. Next slide. Okay, just as a reminder, so Kathleen's going to start us off. As you've been seeing by email, we asked in advance for questions and comments before you guys came. And so some of these questions are from that grouping, if you will. And once she's done, then we're going to go ahead and open up the mic and ask for questions and comments. It's 2:52 right now, so hopefully we can get through this next part and you guys feel satisfied with, expressing what your thoughts are on the presentation day, as any other things that you think we might want to continue to look at on your behalf after this meeting. So, Kathleen.
Thank you, Mark. If everybody's still awake, we want to hear from you today. And as Mark said, we are asking for comments and questions before this meeting, during this meeting, and we will be coming back to you, to hear more of your thoughts. So one of the things that was asked, and I should mention, if you did send in questions or comments, we made sure that we responded to you. We had a number of things that we can triage, but there are some that I'm going to discuss here that are truly very related to the survey and sort of what we've shown here today. So the first question, how will HOA1 residents' usage of these assets, activities, or amenities be used by the HOA1 board when it makes future budget allocation decisions? And what I would say to that is, obviously the board of directors will have complete access and already do to this data. And that's why we ask some of those particular questions about ranking, about how often do you use them, so that we can understand where to not just invest in resources, but also to go back and refine that. So when we do invest, because we do need to, invest in our community, are we doing that in a thoughtful way, and do we actually have data for that? So that's how we would answer that. Another question is with regard to, you saw a lot of the comments were on general HOA cooperation. And one of the questions I got was, regardless of where people stand on the idea of any formal unification of the two HOAs, there are likely clear synergies to be had from increased cooperation. To that end, will the long-range planning committee of both HOAs meet to compare results of these respective surveys? And can the future surveys be done jointly to allow for even better analysis? Well, we can't answer that exactly today, but I think this is, an interesting suggestion, an example of the willingness for people to sort of look at those things. And I think there is support for, some of that potential investigating of that with the cross-tabulation and with the data. Maybe we could have something that shows up to be very specific. As far as the surveys, they are not combined. They're not on the same schedule. And we did have a few questions that we did model after Saddlebrook 2's survey, which came before us, that we thought would also be helpful. I think the last thing that I'll say, because there were a number of comments about this as well within the free text of the survey, and I think it's something that we'll probably want to bring up to management and the board in terms of long-range planning. Is there were a lot of questions about, hey, we're willing to support this amenity. There was one specifically with the dog park, and how, HOA 2 has a few things where they are somewhat citizen-run. Are they a true supported amenity? Is there that type of thing? And I think that's something that probably, when we look at this data and say, where are we going or prioritizing, or what do we need to do, there may be things that don't fall in the same category, that are necessarily competing with each other. So that's what I would say, and perhaps there's a way in planning that we can involve all the residents in some different solutions to some of the wants of the community. And I will turn it back to Mark, and we'll open it up.
Yeah, so a couple more things. When she said that we responded, there were several questions we received that really weren't specific to the resident survey. They were more something that needed to be answered by Vivian and or go to the board of directors. So we've already sent Vivian hers, and then we've sort of consolidated some of the others because, again, like Kathleen's mentioning, we are a committee appointed by our board, but we are not the decision makers. We're the ones who are here to gather the data, make recommendations, because we're all equal owners, and listen to your input, and then try to push back to the board and Vivian and staff basically our findings and maybe some ideas around those findings that might make sense for us as a community to go forward with. So okay, we're going to open up for the mic, so if you have something, question, comment, please come up and speak clearly into the mic. I will comment once again that this is only for HOA 1 residents at this point for comments. So if you could please state your name and your unit number so we capture that, because again, this is being recorded. Okay, thank you.
My name is Ken Larson, Unit 8A, Lot 41. Nothing was mentioned about the mini-mart complex and the retail area, and anything about Robeson's influence on our decisions that we could make going forward. What about including them in some of the ideas that are going forth here, like ice cream and coffee? I think they have at the mini-mart. It's not exactly the atmosphere you might want. But it surprised me to learn that if we were to try to merge, Robeson would have a heavy hand in how that would occur because of the preserve and what he still dictates by his land ownership here. Thank you.
So I guess my answer to that would be we talked about things like Minute Mart and other ideas like that, and we decided that we should focus this on actionable data that we control. So we don't control the Minute Mart at all. We don't have any say in what happens there. We don't own it. And so one of the things when you're developing a survey you got to be careful of is if you add too many questions, people are they're going to eventually just get to a point they're going to shut down on you, and you'll actually see a lot of questions at the end won't get answered because there's just survey fatigue, if you will. And so we had to make some tough choices in that regard, and that's kind of the same thing as far as ropes and RCI's control over the overall scenario. Really not something we felt like the residents themselves could really tell us anything, because a lot of people don't know the details. So you would be asking quite a few questions that people were uninformed about. And again, I'm not trying to discard what you're saying, just letting you know that that did come up conversation-wise as we've gone through these iterations over the past year.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Mark, that in the free text, I've been doing a lot of work with the free text comments, and certainly the minute market or the strip mall area there were frequent comments with regard to that, and I think that is where perhaps we can get more information to understand, so that residents understand the detail, because like Mark said, we really don't control that space. But to the gentleman's point about, what kind of conversations could we have, or what kind of, other ideas or things like that, I think, that would be something that, could be also brought up, and management and board of directors could look at that and decide.
My name is Margaret Batanzos, and I live in Unit 6. I wanted to make a comment about the, about a question about gating the community. There was a group that was, I believe, residents from both HOA 1 and 2 that did quite a bit of work on that a few years ago. And because of the number of public roads that are in our community, it would be almost impossible to do. I'm not saying it couldn't ever be done, but at this particular time, I think it would be exceedingly difficult. There would be so many different gates, and the ability to control a bunch of gates is it's rather difficult.
So let me comment on that, because I think you're not off point at all. First of all, I've never seen the work that was done, and from what I understand, that was done quite a few years ago. And I think part of the thing, it kept coming up in general conversations, right? And as you saw, 52% of the people have been here 9 years or less. So I think we need to figure out how, as a community, do we take things that might have happened 15 years ago that are still relevant to today, but we communicate, or we have a library or a place that you can go back and you could look up gating of community, and the work that was done 10 years ago still is relevant today, right? But I think we could do, this is my own personal opinion, but I think we could do a better job of sort of historical markers of where we've made some decisions and why, back to your point, so we educate the people that are here that might not think in terms of the people that did the deep dive on all of these various places, right?
I would add to that, absolutely, I think that's why some things keep coming up, and there isn't that information. I will tell you myself, when we were looking through this, and it's probably been only a couple of weeks ago I heard, we looked at that. I think what's important is that education, or as Mark said, maybe a way to pull, so that people can at least see that. I will, however, say that that doesn't mean we can't look at it again. And that also doesn't mean that, we can't dive deeper into, is there another solution rather than just
Gates.
Gates, right. Or what is it? We could get back down to, is it security or is it something else? Is it, do we need 10 gates? There's a lot of things, and we wouldn't want to, redo the research or reinvent the wheel. That's why I think it's really important, because I'd like to see the data, but then perhaps things have changed. So I just think that, we need that historical knowledge, but we're trying to do long-range planning. And so there may be some things that we need to consider in the now.
I don't know, I don't recall what group did this survey. I know a woman who was involved in it, and she might have been the chair or the sub-chair or something. She lives in HOA too, but it was a community-wide, and that means both HOAs were involved with it as the individuals. I can ask her where the information might be and get back to you if that's all right.
Yeah. Like I say, I think it's broader than gates, though. I think it goes well beyond gates, because I've lived here since 2015, and sometimes you just find your way around because you ran into the right person at the pool and said, oh, no, that'll never work because we did that in 20, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, good thing I went to the pool today. So I think that comes back to that communication, and that's relevant to gates and everything else as we make decisions, because sometimes there's good reasons why we don't do certain things, right? So.
Well, also, I can tell you, I've lived here 26 years, so I've got a font of garbage in my head.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else have comments or questions? Go ahead, Jack.
Hey, Mark. Jack Bowers, Unit 4. Compliments to the entire team for having done a great job with this survey. Thank you. I had the good fortune of having served on the Property and Roads Committee up until January this year, and we were working very diligently on a plan regarding the renovation of the Roadrunner Grill. I was pleased to see the data identified and clarified some of the things that we had, I think, intuitively known, that we needed a better decor, we needed a better bar, and I think some people would also acknowledge that the throughput out of the Roadrunner Grill is not what you really like to see. I'm not talking about the quality of food, I'm talking about the speed with which you get your service. Yeah. And that's not has anything to do with the front of the house people, the people that are serving you. It's actually the layout of the kitchen is so terribly difficult. We did a considerable amount of work. There's plans have been put together, and it's gone to the board. The board has approved most of that. The first thing that has to be repaired, of course, is the kitchen. There are some safety issues there, fire hazards, sort of things. Has to do with the exhaust. What I'm leading to is that I know that this is one of the most used amenities of this HOA, and I would suggest that if you folks have an interest in the Roadrunner Grill and some helping these folks make some of the decisions and make those recommendations to the board of directors, let them know what you would like to see relative to the Roadrunner Grill. I can tell you what we're currently thinking, and I think that the existing committee, which is taken over by Tony Muscat, we're looking at removing the bar to the far southeast corner of the Roadrunner Grill. That would improve the usage outside from the patio area as well as inside. We were going to relocate the station for the reception, and also where the current bar is in the Roadrunner Grill would be converted into a pizza station with a pizza oven. The back of the house things that have to be done is removing and replacing the entire exhaust system, putting in new, relocating some walls, getting a lot more throughput and improvements in that regard. So
thank you, Joe.
Those are what we're thinking about. So that you be aware, we'd like to have feedback to these folks so that they could pass it on to the board.
Yeah. Thank you. I think the biggest group right now that's focusing on that is still property and roads. I was just at their latest meeting, and I'll before everyone leaves, I will make an ad, if you will. So this community is run on volunteers in a lot of ways. So this fall we have 3 board positions that are going to be voted on. We have a lot of various committees that really, if you're interested in this data, but you've never been on a committee or anything else, my recommendation is show up and just observe, because all of these committee meetings are open. And I always tell people if they're thinking about joining our committee, I say, come to 2 or 3 meetings and try it before you buy it. Because if it's not for you, that's fine. But, I would just encourage people to get involved in our community. I know that like unit reps, that's a huge group and very important to our community. You saw that in our survey that was an important group too. So before everyone jets out of here, let's see some new blood coming into these committees and or running for the board, okay? Thank you. Go ahead, Harry.
Harry Ford, Unit 21, Lot 2, since 2004, and 32 years in HOAs in California. My question, I see you approached the financial question a little bit differently this time. In the prior surveys and in the summary in the communicator, the key 4 financial issues were minimize golf losses, minimize food and beverage losses, adequately fund the reserve, and bring roads to a higher standard. Is there some reason that those questions weren't brought up since they were so prominent in the prior surveys?
Once again, we talked about how deep do we go into certain areas and in the financials. And I think even on some of those, you'll see where it says no opinion yet. There's just a lot of people in here that they've never really gone through the financials. So to ask a broad group of people, we're trying to find the most actionable data. And that was our approach.
Okay, the second question is, in the prior surveys, the individual comments on the various issues were documented on the website in 2019, and they've disappeared. They're no longer there. Are the detailed questions going to be posted on the website this time, and the 2019 comments brought back?
I can answer for ours. Our intent is to post this survey or this results here and make sure that this has been recorded clearly so people can listen to what's been said today. Any other questions or comments? Really? Wow, we did pretty well.
I'm Char.
Just a minute.
I'm Char Crossman, Unit 19. As to Jack Bauer's comments and the Roadrunner Grill renovation, on June 16th at 3 p.m., the board is going to have a work session to discuss the items that are being proposed by the Property and Roads. So if you're interested in that, show up.
Right, thank you.
Residents are welcome.
Thank you. Steve?
Steve Kartsonis, Unit 2, Lot 36, and I'm also the Unit 2 rep. The question I have is, why were there so many questions about HOA2 and all of their stuff?
Because we're trying to look across both HOAs to find out where people are or aren't using. There's a lot of us here, and again, this is going to come back to the swing of comments we have received, but I'll tell you that I use HOA2 amenities more than I use HOA1 amenities, and that's just me, and I'm not trying to answer it for myself, but what we were trying to understand is where are people, how do they feel about Saddlebrook as a whole? And HOA2, by the way, did the same exact thing. So they asked about us because they were trying to figure out on a broad basis, where are people going as an example? And so you'll hear different, sometimes you'll hear, well, we have more people from HOA2 going to our workout facility than from HOA1, right? Well, that's great to hear that in the pool, but does that show up in your survey? And does that show up in your data? So if you start looking at data between surveys, RFID cards, and other data points, that's where you can really kind of boil back the noise and kind of focus it down on the reality, because the squeakiest wheel doesn't get the grease. I mean, that's my opinion, is we need to make sure that the voices of the homeowners are clear, and then the data backs it up, whether it be within the survey, the actual usage based on RFID cards or whatever. I mean, now these days, we all have to use our HOA1 cards to dine in here, right? There's a lot of data sitting there because you're no longer just using your Visa card. So you can see a lot of information. And again, you could take names out, but still start to see a lot of trending. And that's our thought process. So thank you.
I would just add to that a little bit, because when you consider the reciprocal use agreement, which is, has a lifespan. So it would be good to know, the overall importance of that, or if you're considering some other cooperation between HOA1 or HOA2 or any kind of investigating areas. I think certainly that data would really matter, and more importantly, what the residents think as a whole, as a majority, to be able to, like Mark said, understand that if you are always going to Desert View, for instance, I know Mark is on the swim team or coaches the swim team. He's at Desert View Pool. If we don't have some sort of cooperation there, that would really affect him. I would assume, if you can use one or the other.
It's not about me, though. I'm back to
I'm making
the data, right?
But the example of that and getting all of that data to see, what would be the implications of that. Just like all of this data can help decide if we, what facilities do we want to invest in as HOA1.
Okay, we've been here an hour and 15 minutes. I don't see anybody else at the mic, so we're going to adjourn, and I thank everyone for coming today.